Hello, and thank you for joining our launch of the Great British Food Critic competition. So we hope to inspire you to think about a career in hospitality and enter our national competition to have your own food review read, watched, or listened to by our panel of experts. But first, I'd like to tell you about how I got into the world of fine dining, or professional cookery, as I prefer to call it. I don't like the word fine dining, but it's leading to where I am today. So my father was a fruit and vegetable in a market, in markets in Southampton, fruit and vegetable wholesale market, sorry. And one of the perks of his job was to come home with a bag of produce every week. More often than not, it was produce which I hadn't even heard of or seen before. So I was already quite a keen cook. I like cooking from a very early age. But when I saw this bag of ingredients right back then, it just spurred the sort of the curiosity side of what they were, and maybe learn about what to do and how they're prepared, what they tasted like. So this developed a real love of ingredients, which I suppose was a precursor to where I am today. It was a massive influence on me. So my mum and dad were working class people, and they used to go out to work all day, and I used to come home from school. And before I went off gallivanting with all my mates and getting up to no good in the evenings, I used to come home and cook the family meal. Nothing too adventurous, more like bollos and curries and lasagnas and things like that. And I just really enjoyed it, and I took an option to do that at college as well. At school, which was a bit, unusual in those days. So I was at school learning for a qualification for cookery. But I also like money, so I got myself a job at the age of 14 in a Greek restaurant in Southampton, only working Fridays and Saturdays. So mainly cooking chips, kebabs, cutting up salads, stuff like that. But I was paid quite a nice amount of money for doing that, and I was probably one of the richest people in my school. So I thought, wow, this is great. I'm enjoying myself cooking and getting a load of money for it as well. So when it came to leaving school, unfortunately, I always had an ambition of being a professional sportsman in some form. Didn't have the discipline for that way forward. But I thought, well, what should I do with myself? Should I go to school? Go to college? Or go on to university? I left school with quite good academic records, and I thought, well, I got offered a job in the Greek restaurant, and then full time. They were going to pay me even more money, which was really amazing. So I sort of really looked to two guys I used to work for. This first experience of working with a family of people which weren't actual family. They were work colleagues, and I became very close to them. And then it came to go into day release college to get a qualification to go alongside my experience. Of course, I thought I was going to go to college and walk it, because I've been working for 3 years in a Greek restaurant. Thought I knew everything, and I was going to be absolutely have no problems and just sail through college. Unfortunately, when I got to college, my first day, I was surrounded by people that worked in, really nice country house hotels in the New Forest area or surrounding area of Southampton. And they were like a lot better than me, and I was absolutely rubbish, and I was the bottom of the class. And I really, really hated that, and it really ignited the competitive nature in me, and I wanted to make myself the best I could possibly be. So I unfortunately left my job at the Greek restaurant and got myself an apprenticeship in a country house hotel in the New Forest, working for a chef that had worked at the Savoy, which is an amazing hotel in London, really famous, lots of history, very classical, always been at the top of the tree. So he was there for 12 years, and he started as an apprenticeship to give me a really amazing grounding in classical food. And within 6 months, he got me to the top of the class. So he was absolutely amazing. A guy called Paul Norman for my career, and I spent 4 or 5 years with him. But then it was time to sort of really think about what direction to go in. Do I stay within the more classical grounding, or go off and do something a bit more adventurous, a bit more modern? So I bagged myself a job with a chef called Jean-Christophe Novelli. And it was when he was just coming to prominence as a chef. He was one of the most groundbreaking, famous young chefs of the time, alongside another certain chef called Marco Pierre White. You might have heard of him, big guy with massive hair and is a bit mad. So I went to work for Jean-Christophe, spent eight amazing years off and on with him, and he showed me more of a modern type of food. And it was, being a chef, or being a successful chef, it was more than just being able to cook. You know, you were a leader of men. You had to master the art of PR, be a real restaurateur, be, involved in the service and in all aspects of running a restaurant. So I really enjoyed working for him, and from there I went off to work for Marco Pierre White and John Burton Race, and then I worked for a guy called Alan Sondron in Paris for 18 months, which was my finishing school. Every chef that wants to progress, I think, needs to work in France and to see what happens in the home of cuisine and gastronomy. But all these moves were always with one view in mind, and that was to start my own restaurant. That was always my dream. When I started working for myself, but as employed for someone else, I never quite hit the heights. I never quite got to where I wanted to go because I wasn't in control of this myself. So I was always destined to achieve what I needed to achieve by being my own boss. The dream of opening my own restaurant was my ultimate goal. So with that in mind, we ended up opening a restaurant in Cumbria, which I'm from Hampshire, so it was a bit of a different move and an unusual move. I won't go into it because we haven't got too long to talk about how we ended up there, but we ended up there. And I suppose one of the biggest things up there, we got more for our money up there. We had a restaurant which we would have had to spend a lot of money either borrowing or taking on investors to have a restaurant like that in the south, which is where I was from. So we wanted to do that, to set up without any investors, because we wanted to be in control of ourselves. We didn't want anyone to answer to, and that has remained to this day. We've never had any outside investment in our restaurants anywhere around the world. So we're fiercely proud of that fact, and we cherish our independence. So yes, for 2002, 20 years we've been open now, just over. See, the highlight last year was achieving 3 Michelin stars after 20 years. And I think I remember when we first started Longclume, going to the pub to do the ordering at the end of the night over a few pints, and just sat there dreaming about the accolades we wanted to achieve at Longclume, and to achieve 3 Michelin stars, 10 out of 10 in the Good Food Guide, and 5 AA Rosettes. They're the 3 major awards to achieve in your career. And now I've achieved all of them, which I'm really pleased, and I wouldn't have been able to do that without a fantastic team behind me. So that's why we need to be talking to you guys, because we need youngsters to come into our industry to take the next generation forward and to do even greater things. So what skills do you need to go into the hospitality industry? So obviously having a bit of talent helps. You've got to have some passion. You've got to have aptitude for learning. Techniques can be taught, but you need to be determined. You need to be dedicated. You need to be showing humility. be a real good team player, and a real desire to make yourself the best you can possibly be, and love what you do. Obviously, there aren't that many jobs out there where you get paid for doing something that you love doing. You know, nothing beats that. But when I started out, obviously there were some challenges. You know, money. I mean, I didn't get paid very much, to be fair. Location. I worked in the middle of nowhere. Hours. Let's say I worked a few hours in my life. Life balance. You know, not seeing my friends and my family so much. You know, I led a very nomadic life where the team I worked with became my family and my friends. And let's face it, some of the kitchens were tough places to work. Some of them that I mentioned, you know, back then, hospitality jobs always had a really bad reputation. But, you know, I was absolutely committed into what I was doing. So I just got on with it. However, there's been a massive shift now. You know, it's not like that anymore, and rightfully so. So all the negative points I just mentioned, you know, they've been addressed. And youngsters coming into the industry now are well paid, with less hours and working in a fun, friendly, respectful environment. And there's never been a better time to join our industry. So in my generation, guys sadly took a job in hospitality because there was nothing better to do, no other option, or it was the easiest option, not because they loved it, but because they wanted to excel in it. And that is also changing, I'm glad to say, but there's still work to be done, you know, to convince youngsters that this is a real trade, a top profession, an art form, a trade where you can earn a great living and see the world and meet incredible people.
Thank you so much, Simon. Over to you, Georgie, to explain our Great British Food Critic competition.
Thank you. So yeah, the moment we've all been waiting for. Now's the time for me to chat to you about our super exciting competition before we hand over to our second speaker. So the Great British Food Critic competition. In a series of talks and interactive workshops, you will learn the tips and tricks of the hospitality industry to write your own reviews and critics. This could cover a meal cooked at home, a school lunch, a restaurant meal, or a takeaway. You can enter a social media competition to produce winning reviews, which will be judged by a panel of experts from the hospitality industry. So to enter, write a review of 300 words. As we said, this doesn't have to be food that you've bought outside. It could be home cooked food. Include photos of the food and tag Speakers for Schools and Simon Rogan and the name of your school in the tweet with the hashtag TGBFC. Videos, TikToks, Reels are also super invited for the competition. The more creative, absolutely the better. The competition is open to all young people at state schools and colleges, aged 11 to 19. Remember, if you are under 13, make sure you ask the school to post on their social media for you using the hashtag TGBFC. Now, we will be showing this slide again in future broadcasts and it'll be all over our social media as well. So don't feel like you have to memorize all of this right now. But yeah, really excited to be launching this food competition for you guys today. So now we're going to be moving on to our second speaker of the day. We're going to now introduce to our young people watching Richard Vines. Richard is a writer and broadcaster with more than 40 years of experience, including 25 years at Bloomberg, where he was chief food critic. Richard was also chair of the UK and Ireland panel for the world's 50 best restaurants. Richard has won numerous awards, including the Fortnum & Mason Award for Online Restaurant Writer of the Year. Richard reported on food and restaurants from more than 20 countries. Over to expert food critic Richard Vines for his top tips and things to think about when creating your food review for our competition.
Thank you very much, Georgia. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here and thanks for coming on the call. I want to talk a bit about my career first, just to give you some context, and then go on to talk more specifically about food writing. I got into food writing as a journalist. I've been a journalist all my life. There are two ways into it. One is some people from a love of food decide to write about it, and some because of a love of writing, then they want to use that skill for food. And as I say, I'm a journalist. I trained at Cardiff University and on the local newspaper in Sheffield. That kind of training is very useful, particularly for things like getting your facts right. It sounds so obvious, but it's very easy to make mistakes writing, as Simon or anybody else will know who reads food writers. They're even just simple kind of mistakes people make, like how to spell cappuccino, which is 2 P's and 2 C's, or restaurateur, which has no N in it, everyone thinks it's an N, or a name like Gordon Ramsay, which is spelled A-Y, not E-Y, because he's not a footballer now, he was once upon a time. So, just get your facts right. That matters before you do anything else. I went on to work for the Times in London before moving to Asia, where I worked for 13 years in China and Hong Kong. And 6 of those years, I was the foreign editor at the South China Morning Post in Hong Kong. And that gave me the chance to travel around the world doing stories. And some of the highlights where I went through the Khyber Pass through Pakistan to Afghanistan, which was pretty amazing at that time. Afghanistan was volatile then as it is now. And also I met some great people. So I went to managed to get an interview with Nelson Mandela after he came out of prison. And he's the most impressive person I've ever interviewed, one of the most impressive I've ever met. Everything you've heard about him is right, all the good things. I met him in a hotel room in Malaysia, just the two of us, and an aide of his, a woman called Barbara Masekela, who went on to be ambassador to Paris. And we're just chatting. She took our picture. It was so bad, I don't have it. It's a picture top of my head. So some things can go wrong even when you're doing your best. Anyway, going forward a few years, I joined Bloomberg, which is an American financial services company. And I was a journalist with them for 25 years. And in 2004, they were looking for a food writer, and I volunteered, and I managed to get it, which was pretty amazing because I didn't have that particular experience at the time. So what I thought, what a difficult job to do. How do you write about food? You can enjoy it, but it's very hard to describe a taste or a flavour or an experience. What I personally did was, well, there's a couple of things you can do. First, watch other people talking about food and writing about food. So, watch chefs on TV, watch food contests, food programs. And what I personally did was to try to meet chefs. And I made that my main thing, to just all the time try to meet chefs, which you can do. But otherwise, if you can't meet chefs, even if you just talk to whoever cooks at home, your mum or your dad or whatever, it's good to have a conversation about food before you try and write about it and describe it for other people. I met a lot of chefs in my time, actually. Jamie Oliver was one of the nicest guys I've met. What you see on TV is exactly what you get with him. Gordon Ramsay's a bit different. He's on TV very sweary and shouty, as you know, but in person he's fairly softly spoken and I'd say intelligent and witty and quite good to deal with. And then there's Heston Blumenthal, of course, who you might know from The Fat Duck, a 3 Michelin stars, highly experimental chef and so on, has what seem to be crazy ideas, but in fact he's very articulate and friendly, and it's worth listening to him and reading books of these people. Anyway, when it comes to restaurant viewing, the first thing you have to learn really is that people are probably not going to read the second paragraph. You have to make the start of your story interesting and the headline interesting. Try to think about what you want to read rather than just what you want to write. When I got the job at Bloomberg, I started reading all the restaurant critics, people like Jay Rayner in The Observer, and Marina O'Loughlin in The Guardian. They were 2 of the big ones at the time. And what you find in reviews, if you read them or look online at things, the great writers don't just tell you a list of the dishes and the ingredients, what they ate. They tell you about the restaurant and the food, and sometimes put it in the wider experience of what the chef is trying to do or a particular movement in food. Simon mentioned French food, which completely dominated British gastronomy in, post-war, I'd say. Well, not immediately post-war, we didn't really have good food then, but in the 70s and 80s. And now it's become far more international influences, not just from places like Spain, but also Japan is a big thing. But if you want to write about food, you don't have to go to a fancy restaurant. You just write from your experience. And it's the same whether you're reviewing McDonald's or your mum and dad's cooking at home. You've got to be, they probably better be pretty nice if you're writing up food at home. One of the things you have to remember is that food tastes different in different contexts. Strawberry might taste sweeter on a summer day, for example, in the countryside with your family and friends, rather than if you're just sitting, eating and watching TV. Heston Blumenthal tells a story of an imaginary person wandering through a forest in the rain, and it's getting dark and she's lonely and wandering her way home, and sees a cottage with a kind of warm light and knocks on the door, and they let her in and invite her into the kitchen, which is really warm, and give her a cup of hot cocoa. And it's the best hot chocolate she's ever tasted. It's not because it's got high cocoa content or whatever. It's just because the content, if you're happy, you're probably going to enjoy food more. If you're sad, enjoy it less. So think about your feelings as well as about what you're eating. The experience of eating, whether at home or out, is an interaction between you and your food, what's on the plate. And remember that food writing, as I say, doesn't have to be about fancy places. People are probably more interested to read a review of a sausage roll at Greg's than some French dish they've never heard of. You should just hone your skills and so on with, I would say, with the simple things. You have to make it interesting. So when you're writing, you need to think about what you want to read. It's important, yeah, to know whether the pasta's cooked properly, al dente, that the tripea onions are sweet, the Amalfi lemons are sharp or sweet. But also, certainly if you're in a restaurant, you want to know the context. You want to know whether it's the other diners are interesting, what the playlist is, you know, because if whether you listen to Cardi B or, I don't know, Coldplay or whoever, you know, or whether decor is like an Ibiza nightclub, all these things that affect your experience of dining. And although I'm sure Simon will tell you, and I will tell you too, the food comes first, think about the broader experience. Sometimes people get a bit carried away with just trying to be too clever writing. Don't try to be clever, but do be smart. Think about what you're writing, what people are reading. When it comes to restaurants, the experience starts long before you ever go. You click on the website. Does it contain the information you need? Does it tell you when the restaurant's open? Does it tell you what's on the menu? And does it tell you the prices? Because prices can be pretty scary in some restaurants. When you phone up, do they pick the phone up? Are they friendly? Are they welcoming? When you get there, is it a nice table? What's the crowd like? Do you feel comfortable? Are the wait staff friendly, or are they a bit condescending? You know, you don't like that. If you don't like it, you should say it. And does the menu make sense? Do you like it? Are there things you want to eat on it or not? When the dishes come, do they look appealing? There might be a formal arrangement of the ingredients, or something like a Jackson Pollock abstract with them splattered all across the plate. All those are the kinds of things you look at. Whether you enjoy a restaurant or even eating at home, it's about so many things other than the food. When I was young, a school teacher asked us to bring in a sweet to class to write about the taste, and we weren't allowed food in school, though I used to eat at the back of the class. So it's quite a big day, and I still remember it, though this was 50 years ago, and had a sherbet lemon, and then you just taste first of all the kind of sweetness of that shell, and a little bit of sharpness, and then crunch into the powdery centre, which is a different texture, completely and different flavour. And then your mouth is coated with the sweetness of the lemon. So you just think about, you know, how it looks, how it tastes, the texture. Because food can involve all the senses. I went to a tempura restaurant in Tokyo. Tempura is, you know, kind of deep fried battered food, very light batter. And the chef there only cooked tempura, and he used to listen to the fat. So it wasn't just even looking at how things were done or touching them. He was hearing how the fat was to try and to try and get the appreciation of how the food was getting there. I've been to a lot of restaurants around the world. The most strange, I suppose, was a place called El Bulli in Spain, which is closed now. You couldn't get a table. It won world's best restaurant 5 times, and had 48 courses there. 48 courses. I felt a bit sick afterwards. And my most memorable dish, probably I went to there's a Danish called René Redzepi from Noma in Copenhagen, and he did a pop-up restaurant in London at Claridge's, and he served a kind of salad, some cabbage leaves. The odd thing was there were live ants on it. Yeah, live ants. So if you're trying to eat it, these things were crawling across. Quite challenging eating can be, but it's good to be curious, and it's good to be an adventurous eater. I hope that helps. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard and Simon, for those incredible insights into your career. We're now going to move on to the student Q&A. We have had some questions pre-submitted, which is amazing, but for those listening, if you do want to submit any questions, feel free to do that through the Q&A chat function now as well. So yeah, going to get started while we continue to pick Simon and Richard's brains. So we're going to start with a question for Simon. You touched a little bit on why you wanted to move out of London and how that kind of process happened, and also how long it took you to get your Michelin stars. But what do you think it really took for you to get those Michelin stars? What's the main thing that really helped your restaurants go from restaurant to Michelin star restaurant?
To be quite honest, I don't really know. No one seems to know what it takes to win Michelin stars. But obviously, for me, the food's got to be very good. But I think consistency is very, very important. Also, originality. It's food with a real story to tell or to reflect your personality. I think that's what gives it that little edge. So how we got to 3 stars this year, I suppose it's because we're always evolving. We might try to make our guest experience better every single day. We refine, we refocus, and we're always working on technique and surprise combinations. But at the end of the day, our amazing ingredients, the ingredients that we grow ourselves from our own farm just down the road, are at the forefront. You know, flavour for me is absolutely everything. And I think what took us over the line this year was really concentrating on those layering of flavours in each dish to give it that extra dimension and to take it to another level. Obviously, you know, they say it's all about the food, and you know, I'd probably disagree with that. You've got to have a great team out front as well, and a beautiful dining room in a beautiful area. So when you've got all those elements together, then you do the best that you can do. Hopefully these things come to you.
Amazing, thank you so much. Fab. So the next question, we're going to go to Richard then. So Richard, I've had a question come through, which is, what makes a food critic get noticed and stand out from other ones? What are key skills that have kind of helped you get to where you are now?
Gosh, that's quite a difficult question. Some food critics try and get noticed by being controversial. You see people writing really, really critical things. I don't know if you've been on the receiving end of that, Simon.
A few.
But you know, I hope people will do it by trying to be an interesting writer. As I say, try and think what your reader wants to read. First of all, don't talk down to them. Try and understand them. If you're going to having some fancy French dish, I would say explain what it is. Don't just assume knowledge and so on. And don't be snooty. Don't be too, as I say, too snooty to write about something simple. I did a thing taking a 3 Michelin star French chef from London to Paris to try McDonald's baguettes versus baguettes in ordinary French stores and so on. Just try and think what people are interested to read about. Try and write with originality and with knowledge. Just got to, you know, work on your knowledge every day as a writer, and work on your writing too, and show it to your friends and try and get advice, I would say. Thanks.
Amazing, thank you. And then that actually leads on quite nicely to a question we got for Simon, which was, how do you handle criticism? You know, when you're trying new recipes or customer or critic reviews, how do you stay super resilient when someone criticises something that you've produced or made?
I mean, to start with, it's hard. You know, a hell of a lot goes into what we do. And when there's negativity, it can be quite hard to take, especially when you're less experienced and you're trying to make a name for yourself, because you're always pushing and the pressure is immense. But over the years, you get older, you get wiser, and realize you can't please everyone all the time. You know, our industry is a very subjective industry, and what's amazing to one person may not be so good to another. Now, that doesn't mean that person that's been critical is right. It's just their opinion, which you have to respect. But now, generally, I ignore it and don't take it too seriously. That goes for positive reviews as well, though. I mean, I tend not to take notice of them either. So at the end of the day, I'm confident and content in what we do. So it really doesn't bother me either way.
Cool. Yeah, some really great advice there for some of our young people who are facing some criticism or some resilience that they need in their lives right now. Cool. So the next question, which I really like, I'm excited for the answer to this one, is for Richard, which is, what is one of the best dishes and also one of the worst dishes that you've ever had to review?
Gosh, that's difficult. I've just got some things I can't eat. I really can't eat. And one of them is beetroot. When I was at school, I was forced to eat beetroot. Those days they made you and I'd be crying and so on. And I've had a chef come up to me, put beetroot in front of me, say, I've cooked this specially for you. And I found that difficult. Otherwise, you know, something like the live ants is probably as bad as it's going to get, isn't it? And then for food, best dishes, I mean, gosh, I've had some fantastic dishes around the world. Places like the Fat Duck, which is Heston Blumenthal, which I mentioned. There's a dessert there, which is served on a cushion that floats. It's got kind of magnet underneath it, but it's actually 3 or 4 inches off the table, and it's amazing to see. Otherwise, I just enjoy food all the time. So if you have some, as Simon says, some fantastic ingredients. My favourite cuisine, actually, though, is Indian, oddly enough, rather than French or anything. I love that, and I was going to say I'll travel around the world for Indian. I'll go to India for Indian mainly. But sorry, I don't have a best dish ever, I'm afraid.
That's fair. We actually have also had a pretty similar question come in for Simon, which is, when you're going out to eat, Simon, what do you look for in the quality of a restaurant? What's a quality restaurant for you as a consumer?
Well, I really enjoy going to restaurants that have a real buzz and excitement to them. You know, I don't like stuffy restaurants. You know, I like to enjoy myself. I think, like, I suppose a restaurant with a strong message. You know, obviously the food has got to be top notch with a slick service. But I suppose there's a restaurant that serves the best seasonal, local, organic ingredients. That has a positive environmental impact. I mean, that's really important these days, and those sort of restaurants will always attract me. But like Richard, I mean, I'm a big fan of Indian. My favourite food is Thai food, actually. With our restaurants in Asia, we're always out in Asia quite a lot. Chinese, Malaysian, Filipino. So I quite like Thai food for its fragrant flavours. And yeah, that's my go-to meal if I've got a night off, basically.
Amazing. And a bit of a follow-on to that question, actually. I know you mentioned at the start that you're not a huge fan of the term fine dining, but what, in your opinion, makes a restaurant fine dining?
Well, I suppose people look at fine dining and like this, look at the posh, like a really sort of like a quite tight service. I would say stuffy service, fine tableware, crockery, cutlery, just an all-round experience where you can't really enjoy yourself, I don't think, with that sort of thought of what fine dining is. I think you could have fine dining and still, which is the standard of the food on the plate, and doesn't have to have all the trappings of what people perceive fine dining to be, with all the pomp and ceremony that goes with it. I don't know. I mean, that's well for Richard to answer, really. I mean, I try not to, and I try not to. I don't really like the words fine dining. I just it's great food in a great restaurant, really.
Fab, thank you. Cool, so we've got a question also come through for Richard, which is, how have you learned to give feedback and write maybe not a glowing positive review in a constructive way?
I think there's no point in just flattering a chef. Even the chefs don't appreciate it. They want your honest opinion. But I find, and I'm talking about chefs rather than your mum and dad at the moment, are quite sensitive people, and they probably know a lot more about food than you do. So they may not want your advice. So I would just don't like something, just explain why you like it. You don't need to say the chef's bad, this is rubbish. You just try, as any writing and any dealing with people, to be a bit diplomatic about it, and how you do, I would say that. And, you know, just as you probably would at home, if your mum's overcooked something or your dad has undercooked something, best not to make a face and say this is disgusting. Just try and be a bit positive, or sometimes know when to keep quiet. If you go to a restaurant, in my opinion, if you go to a restaurant that's absolutely terrible, you probably don't need to write about it, you know, unless it's somewhere very popular, people are waiting for, you know, there's a waiting list for tables, and you really need to say, well, it's not that good. Generally, if I go to a restaurant I really dislike, I just don't write about it.
Fab, thank you. Cool, question for Simon now again. You touched a little bit before on the importance of the entire team when working in a restaurant, but would you be able to elaborate a little bit more on how important the entire team is, from kitchen staff to front of house staff to bar staff, and how all of those different roles are super important?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, it's something that's essential. You know, we work very hard. You know, we always like to promote from within, you know, because we like to see people that can get a career progression. You put a lot of time, effort, money into training these people. So you want to keep them for as long as you can, by providing them with the right conditions to flourish, the right pay, the right hours, work-time balance, the right product, give them the latest equipment and the working conditions to excel. But more importantly, you know, to let them see that there is career progression within our group by internal promotion. So we're able to open restaurants all around the world at the moment. We have a very strong team, and they're being pushed forward by the team below them. So my head chef in Hong Kong, Ashley, he's been with me now for about 8 years. He started with me as a commie chef in one of my restaurants and went through the ranks, and now he's the head chef of our flagship restaurant in Asia. And what better motivation and inspiration for all the youngsters starting off with us now, that in 5, 6, 7 years time, that could be them. So they don't need to go anywhere. They can stay with us for a long time. If they don't want to work in the Lakes, we've got London. If they don't want to work in London, we've got Asia, or any other restaurants we're opening up this year. You know, it makes it so much easier to keep your staff. You know, they're the future. You know, they're the ones that are going to take L'Enclume and all the other restaurants forward for the next 20 years. So, you know, to have that core team stable and absolutely motivated in what they do is very, very important.
Amazing. Thank you so much for answering that one. And then we're just going to end with one final question, which I'm going to actually direct to both of you guys. So Simon, I guess you can go first. And the question is, if you could do any other job in the world, what would it be?
I couldn't imagine doing any other job in the world, to be quite honest. So
that's a pretty lucky position to be in, hey?
Yeah, I mean, let's say, I mean, you know, if you can get into our industry and be a success in it, I don't think there's many industries in the world which are more enjoyable, more exciting, and more rewarding. Obviously, I mentioned being a professional sportsman, probably come pretty close to that, but I count being a chef and being able to go to work on a Monday, well, if we're open on a Monday, or on any day, going to work excited for what I'm going to be doing that day. There's not many industries like that, I can think of. So, I've been at this so long now and had such a great time. I wouldn't change it for the world. I've achieved everything that I wanted to achieve, and I've achieved a great lifestyle to go with that as well. So I'll stick with what I've got. Thank you.
Amazing. And Richard, how about you? Any other careers or jobs you'd want to do in the world?
A couple of things. I'd like to be an airline pilot. I love traveling. I love
nice.
I love seeing other cities, and I love trying different food, which you can if you're paid to fly around the world. If I couldn't get that, I'd like to be a movie star because I want to be rich and famous, but I've left it too late now.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much for answering all of our questions. Before we wrap up, I'm just going to ask both of you if either of you got any final closing comments that you would like to leave our young people with.
Only what I've said before, really. I mean, there's never been a greater time to enter our industry. I always go back when I'm going around the world and working with conferences and experience and conversations with other chefs, that basically, we've as a country, we've never had the history. We've never had we've never seen this industry as a trade, an art form. Whereas in other countries like France and Italy and Germany, they have. So they've got more history than us. So it's my final push in my industry, with all the time I've got left in the industry, to try to change that, to try to make sure people know that this is the most amazing trade to get involved with, and our restaurants and personnel are on a par with anyone in the world. So we should get that out there.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Richard, any final comments to leave with our young people?
Yeah, I would just advise you to, keep learning about food. Don't think you know it all. Don't be smart. Just be a bit modest and keep trying to educate yourself and listen to people like Simon, obviously. But I also want to hear people have questions for me. They're welcome to contact me via social media. I'm Richard Vines on Twitter or richard.vines on Instagram, and I'll try and answer your questions. Thank you.